Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In the previous video, we learned quite a great deal about looping constructs, and in this video, we are basically going to implement that in code. But before we can start with looping constructs like for loop and while loop, let's understand a bit about the range function that we saw earlier. So we are going to cover functions in greater detail in the next couple of lessons, but for now, just understand that this line of code here, as you see, basically gives you a chance to loop over numbers in this range. So there are different ways of working with the range function. The first way is you just give it a single number in the parentheses as parameter. What happens when you give it a single number is the range function is going to consider this as the endpoint of the loop. So in this case, we have given range as 4 and the loop will start from 0 and it will stop at 4. So let's run this code and that's what you will only get the output 0, 1, 2 and 3. You won't get 4 because the value 4 is the stopping criteria. Similarly, if I change 4 to 10 and run this function, you will just get a value from 0 to 9 because as soon as the number variable hits the limit of 10, the loop breaks. So this is one way of working with the range function. The second way is you give it to two parameters, the starting point and the end point. Remember, in the first case, we are always starting from 0. Suppose you want to start from 1. So you can just say for number in range 1, 5, and the value of number will keep on updating by every repetition of the loop. So if we run this function, in this case, you are getting a value from 1 to 4 because at 5, it's stopping and it's starting at 1. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 is included while 5 is excluded. Similarly, you could have done something like instead of here, 2 and then run this code and now you will be getting 2, 3 and 4. You can even change this to 2 to 10 and run this code and you will get numbers starting from 2 to 9. 10 is not included. Now another interesting thing you can do with the range function is so far we only had the option of ending at some point or both starting at some point and ending at some point. With the range function you can also decide what should be the step size while moving through the numbers. For example, in this case, here you see on the screen, I give the starting value as 1 and then the ending value at 10. And let's choose the step value as 1 and then run this code. So basically, we will get values from 1 to 9. Now in this function, I have passed another argument, which is step size. So in this case, let's change 1 here to 2. And now I'm choosing a step size of 2. Let's run this code and see what happens. So what that basically means is you start at 1, print 1, then skip 2 numbers, and then you go to 3. Then you again skip 2 numbers, then you go to 5, then you skip 2 numbers, go to 7, then skip 2 numbers and go to 9. So step size is basically tells you how big steps you should take while going through the number range. For example, if I write here step size 3, the output is going to change. Because when we say 3, it will first give the number 1, then 3 places from 1 is 4, so it will give 4, then again 3 places from 4 is 7, so it will give 7. Now this is a very important characteristics of range function to have, and when you keep on coding for some time in Python, you will realize that you will play around with these values a lot. Another interesting thing is, remember that we had worked with the string data type earlier. So using for loop, you can actually iterate over all the characteristics of the string. So in this case, the string was Texas Wesleyan, and you just say for character in Texas Wesleyan. So character is variable in which this value is being stored character by character. So first you get TEXAS underscore and so on. And suppose instead of Texas Wesleyan, let's type it here. Welcome. And then let's run this code. So in this case, I'll first get W, then E, then L, then C, so on. So this was basic knowledge of loops that we have already learned. Let's go a bit beyond this, and here comes the concept of nested loop. So what is a nested loop? As the name suggests, it's basically a loop inside a loop. So you have to first loop for range 1, 2, 3. And then you have the second loop in the strings ABC. The way the nested loop works is for every iteration of the outer loop, there will be all the iterations of the inner loop. Now, what do I mean by this? So the outer loop in this case will have 2 iterations. The The first one is for value 1 and second one is the value 2. It won't have the value 3 because 3 is the stopping criteria. So we have value 1 here on the screen you see and value 2. The inner loop have 3 iterations because it has A, B and C. So the outer loop, as you see here, at the iteration number 1. In that case, at the iteration of number 1, we run the second loop, which is the inner loop. We say A, then B, then C. So second loop is completely finished for one iteration of the outer loop. Again, the outer loop gets updated to value number 2. In that case, again, the inner loop is being executed. And so every time the outer loop gets executed, the inner loop gets executed. So suppose instead of 3 here, stopping criteria we choose 4 and run this code. In this case, for 1 you have A, for 1 you have B, for 1 you have C, and then for 2 and 3. So basically the total number of times this code will run is the number of times this outer loop will run into the number of times this inner loop will run. So outer loop runs 3 times and inner loop runs 3 times. So 3 into 3 is 9. So as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When we have 3 here, the outer loop runs for 2 times and inner loop runs for 3 times. And therefore, when we run this code, we have 2 into 3, 6 repetitions. So this is the concept of nested loops. Let's now understand the while loop. Now, as we already know from the previous video, while loop is actually useful when you do not have the total number of iterations explicitly specified, and you just have a stopping criteria or a condition on which you want to stop the loop. So let's take an example. In this example, I say number is 0. So we need to initialize the iterator here. And it starts with number 0. And I say while number is less than 7, then do this part of this code. So if we run this code, we will get 6 values. Notice that in the second statement, I'm increasing the number by 1 at each step. And this is basically to make sure that at some point the value of number exceeds 7 and the loop stops. And we can change this by 2 if you would like. And in this case, I'm increasing the number by 2. And when you run the code, you will see that we have 0, 2, 4, and 6. And the loop is not going to work after 6 because the number becomes greater than 7 and the loop doesn't work. So while loop has its own advantages that you will figure it out as you go further in the course video. This is all how we implement the loops in Python. Thank you.